So the mixing system that was developed in 2011 and we successfully deployed and used in 2012 and again this year, 2013, is a novel technology developed by the University of Wisconsin, Jordan Reed, Eric Brown, Zach Lawson. And it is a system that is driven by pressurized air. On shore there is a pump house where there are air compressors continually running. The compressed air flows out into the middle of the lake through aeration hoses up to an air distribution hub, a floating raft in the middle of the mixing system. And from the raft there are pneumatic hoses that go out to the individual GELI. The GELI are large trampoline-like objects that receive a dose of air into an air bladder. They become buoyant and rise to the surface, creating turbulence on the way to the surface, and then when they sink back down to the bottom on the way down.
Until we had completely mixed the lake in mid-August of last year, when the entire lake was approaching 21 degrees Celsius, that's when we started to see significant responses by the smell. They were not only moving into really shallow water, in the warmest water in the lake, but they were doing it in the middle of the day. We saw a lot of these fish being consumed by eagles and seagulls, and for a fish that hates temperature, hates warm temperature, and hates light, it was pretty bizarre to see them at the surface during the middle of a bright sunny day. And that's when we started to really think that we were having a negative impact on the smelt population, not just changing their behavior. During that same time period that the smelt were observed at the surface, we checked the length-weight relationships of all these individuals, and you could see a huge divergence in the population where you would see some individuals that were really, really plump and others that were very, very skinny. And so that was about August 15th to September 15th. And we continued watching that, and we noticed that those fish that were very skinny seemed to disappear at the end of September. And so we discovered this late in the fall, that this group of individuals was no longer present in the population. And that kind of prompted us to go back and look at some of our actual population estimates throughout the course of the summer. And our estimates for the population mortality rate was actually somewhere between 30 to 90% of the adults were no longer there at the end of last fall. And so we compared this to a pre-manipulation year, 2010, and that number was a little closer to about 45%. So we saw a large jump in the mortality rate of the smelt population that we could detect with our hydroacoustics population estimates. And we're not exactly sure what that number was, but we, going through the entirety of last field season, we saw this divergence in the smelt population. We knew that we were having an impact on them, and then we calculate this pretty high mortality rate in the population. And so we were pretty confident going into this field season that we had a significant impact on the adult smelt in the lake, but we didn't know what to expect once the lake thawed. This spring, we had a really late ice out, and the smelt were seemingly stressed from the year before. And monitoring their spawn this spring, at the end of April, we noticed that the adults still came in and spawned, and somehow they successfully pulled off a year class. And that was surprising. However, shortly thereafter, we noticed these fish floating in to shore, and so we would see hundreds of fish every day washing into the beach, and we'd pick these up, and all of these individuals had these lesions all over their gills and on their head and some on their tail. And so we picked up around 1,000 fish in total. And so right now we're kind of in the process of deciphering what the age of those fish were. That's a lot of work to go in and section otoliths, and actually read the otolith and figure out how old these individuals are. So we're going back and we're figuring out what was the age structure of the smelt population last year before the manipulation, what was the age structure last year during the manipulation when we're really applying a lot of pressure, making these fish really uncomfortable, and what was the age structure of the population following that really, really warm part of the fall when we had the entire lake completely mixed to 21.5 degrees Celsius, and then who died during that disease outbreak this spring, how old were they, and then who's left. So for the smelt that went through the manipulation last year, only adults, did only the young survive, and so that's what we're trying to figure out right now.
We deployed the technology and began mixing the lake in a similar fashion to 2012, and by mid-June, early July, we realized that we were not going to be meeting the same temperature gain at the bottom of the lake as we had in 2012. So then we began to consider some modifications that we could make to the system to increase the rate of mixing. The modifications that we've made to the jellies to allow them to cycle faster are we turned on a second compressor, so the recharge time, the pressurized air builds in the system faster. And then we also added a vent hole to the jelly air bladder to allow them to sink faster and return to the bottom of the lake quicker than they had previously. Another problem that we encountered last year and again this year was the jelly membrane tearing away from the stainless steel frame, and also the air bladder starting to open up and increase venting rate. So in order to address those problems, we reinforced the edge of the jelly membrane with the same material that we had used before, but just thickening the material around the edge so it wouldn't tear away as easily. And then reinforcing the heat weld around the air bladder with another piece of material.
This year in 2013 is our second year of manipulation where we're mixing Crystal Lake. We plan to mix Crystal again next year, 2014, and then following 2014 we will probably continue to monitor the lake extensively to see how the system responds after the mixing, but not while we're actually conducting the manipulation.
Okay.
Start it.
So in 2012, you're gonna have to move, Zach. Just move. Just go away for a minute.
There's not gonna be any bloopers, Tom.
They're everywhere.